Let's hold our thought there. 202-521-1320. We do have Anthony on the line who's been waiting in a second. Anthony, I'm not sure when you called in or what you wanted to talk about, but give us your thoughts here on the political misfits.
Hi guys. First of all, thank you for doing your best to quarantine. I know Jamal is working from a distance today. As far as this whole markets thing goes, I think there's a big difference between milk and healthcare, and I think the point is, if our tax dollars are paying for these things anyway, I mean, you just had Donald Trump trying to bribe, I don't remember which country it was.
Germany.
Yeah, for exclusive rights to the vaccine. That's absolutely ridiculous. But if you want to talk about controlling inflation, that's one thing. Having the real resources to be able to combat these things, which we don't have, which is why we're in such terrible conditions with China. We have to get all of these supplies from them. I think that is a big part of this. But what I really called for was the class divide. I'm a gig musician, actually, by trade. And I see a lot of my musician workers, colleagues, freaking out about this. But I noticed that there's a pretty obvious class divide. People are talking about, we need to have savings, and I'm thinking people don't have savings. We're working paycheck to paycheck every day. This is not that different for people who've been dealing with this economic situation for their entire lives. I'm noticing that people that have the means are traveling to go home. I haven't been home in years to see my family. And I considered doing it when all these market prices fell on the airlines, but I'm going to do what the responsible thing to do is and stay home. That's about all I wanted to say. So.
Yeah, Anthony, thank you so much for your call there. Yeah, on several different points. One, again, just to reiterate what we're saying, Americans are in a crisis every day. And this was what Bernie Sanders got across to the debate that really spoke to me last night, was that these issues while we'll take the call from Anthony. Anthony, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. Love what you guys are doing. Just as a quick aside on the Andrew Yang thing, I don't know why everybody's surprised by his lack of math skills. I think Hassan Minhaj really kind of ousted him on his show when he couldn't answer that 7th grade math problem on air. But I want to talk about the election fraud. I'm sure you guys have heard about all the voting machines going down and being moved, the polling stations being moved, and Bernie just came out saying these long lines are egregious. But something that's not being talked about as much that I came across a few days ago by some election integrity activists is the exit poll discrepancies. I don't know if you guys have seen much about this, but there is a website going around by an independent researcher. It's called tdmsresearch.com. That's T as in tiger, D as in dog, M as in Mary, S as in Sam, research.com. And just the gigantic exit poll discrepancies. I wanted to know you guys' thoughts on that. Thanks a lot.
So, look, elections are dramatically important, to put it mildly. And it is our way of determining who is going to take power without there being like a war or conflict. It should be it's vitally necessary that this process is transparent and this process is fair.
None of your business says suggestions in response to election fraud. Donate $1. Election fraud. You want to jump into that real quick and tell us what you think? Because on this show, we're election integrity activists. As well as, having a show here. And that's something we go into hard. We study deep. We talk to a lot of professions. We followed the whole LA election last time. I feel that Bernie Sanders' biggest sin is the fact that he hasn't called out election fraud and challenged some of this voting. And not even the fact, tell everybody, educate everybody that all our computers and our systems, our software, are owned by corporations. It's proprietary software. What's your thought on election fraud in general?
So I think that it happens, and I think that we have a lot of problems confronting the legitimacy of our elections. I wouldn't fault Bernie for not making a bigger deal of it, only because he's a candidate, and frankly, we are in particularly vulnerable positions to challenge the fairness of the processes that we're auditioning to be evaluated under. That really has to come from other actors. And I would say that the divergences between the exit polls and the observed official results are more than suspicious. That's enough in any other context for people to declare the results illegitimate. I really wish that the press would demonstrate some independence here. I applaud your view of these issues. I think the fact that the corporate media, and I'd even also fault the international media for accepting the cue of the corporate media and describing our election results as legitimate, even when there's objective indicia to the contrary. I think that's an irresponsible act of journalism, and I think we're all paying a cost as a result. On the particular threat vectors that threaten the legitimacy of our elections, I want to expand the frame. I'll put it this way. You don't need a computer to hack an election.
All of this is forms of voter suppression, but election fraud is also something that not only the Republican Party does, but the Democratic Party. We know we have Secretary of State Alex Padilla and Dean Logan, who is the clerk, and they knew we were talking about all these problems before March 3rd, and they knew, and they didn't do anything about it. They led people to feel like everything was fine, and that is the corruption, and that corruption comes from obviously the top. And I agree with you that Bernie Sanders may not be in a position to necessarily say something, but I think the time for that has passed. I think right now more than ever, obviously the people need to speak out about it, and the corporate media is obviously going to ignore it, which is why we do it. But I mean, I need to see it more from people, from candidates running for Congress, because are we ever going to get anything that we want, whether it's the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, when we have not only to fight the Democrats and the Republicans, but also the system that enables them to continuously stay on top. We've seen the situation between Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Tim Canova. We've also seen other progressives go against these big corporate politicians, and it's very, very hard for us to win. And sometimes it is because not enough people are aware of the progressive issues, but more often than not, I think it's because the system is set up against us, and that is something that I think we have to more stop being afraid to call it election fraud in general from our entire government, and start talking about it as a non-taboo thing, because when we talk about it as a taboo thing, then people start like being afraid to even say the words, oh, it's rigged, or this is fraud, etc.
I get it. The first work I did in my legal career was trying to defend a bipartisan congressional attempt to take corporates off money out of elections to diminish the reality and appearance of corruption. And when we were successful in that case before the DC Circuit, before the Supreme Court in the Citizens United decision, then reversed effectively the rules that we helped establish in those cases. It needs to be a clamoring, a chorus of voices. Yeah. And I think for us as candidates, and I do talk about the threats to our election legitimacy as policy issues, but for a campaign having in the wake of an election to allege election fraud is just a challenging position to be in. And I'd much rather see those observations coming from academics, poll watchers, international observers, and journalists, because they're in strong positions to report the fact. Whereas anyone will perceive a politician or a campaign's presentation of the facts as inevitably and inherently self-interested and inflected with that view. And so I think this is a real need for real independent journalism of the sort that you all are practicing. I really hope that more journalists can take your cue and invite attention to these issues. And every time an exit poll diverges from the result, that divergence should be the top line of every news report on that election. And too often we see what passes for news reduced to stenography. Here's the official result. Well, if it doesn't match the exit polls, say that, because people need to know. I really do agree with you that those are important issues for us to be kept aware of in this important time.
But Shahid, why are you saying that Bernie Sanders doesn't have a responsibility to call it out? He's the one who got cheated. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to make this all about, I'm not trying to put everything on Bernie Sanders' shoulder, whatnot. I understand there's a lot of pressure when it comes to this particular subject. It seems to be taboo at sorts. Like I can see some of his campaign managers may be telling him, hey, listen, don't say there's rigging. You're going to look like a sore loser, and it's going to really turn off most of the country. However, this has happened before in 2016, and now it's happening in 2020. Isn't it his position? Shouldn't Bernie Sanders take the position that he has to fight for everyone's vote to be counted and do what's necessary, and at the very least have a lawsuit against some of these states that have had just serious problems with their exit polls? Go ahead.
I don't think that's a crazy position. I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying. I certainly think that he has gone to bat for everybody's right to vote. He's talked about it very explicitly and made the point that if you can't win a free and fair election, I think this is a direct quote, get the hell out of politics is what he has said to those figures. So I think he has, on the front end, called for fair elections. I don't think the idea of a lawsuit is crazy. I think it makes sense to defend the integrity of our elections. And I also don't think that he shouldn't talk about it. The only point I'm raising here is that I think the people that we rely on to share facts, namely reporters, journalists, that's what the press is for, to call out misrepresentations, to observe where the official facts and the facts on the ground diverge. That's not to say that politicians can't or shouldn't do that. We do. I think Bernie does. I certainly do. Just the point I'm making is that I don't think we are in the strongest position to do it, because people will recognize anything we say as inflected by a political perspective, as distinct from an empirical commitment to what is happening on the ground. We're all very embedded in facts. I mean, it is the fact of human misery and suffering that drives me to advocate for Medicare for all. It is the fact of climate chaos in our species. runaway corporate resource extraction racket in driving it that is driving me to advocate for the Green New Deal. I just mean to say that I think looking to politicians to critique the legitimacy of the election infrastructure places us in an unfortunate position. And frankly, I think there are stronger voices to make that case. And I think that again, that journalists are the strongest actors to reflect upon the difference between fact and spin in our society. And the fact that so many of your counterparts, particularly in the institutional media, refuse to call out the spin and present it as uncritical fact. I think that's 9/10 of the reason we're in this mess. That we've been spoon-fed supposed facts that are anything but for decades. And I think the real facts of the matter are that working people fuel our economy. Working people always take it on the chin. In times of crisis, we get abused even more relentlessly. And at the end of the day, we have elected representatives who, in more cases than not, are out there defending our corporate masters instead of our families and our students and our working and our neighbors in between jobs. Working class Americans are the ones who need representation and need a voice right now. And I hear you saying that voice hasn't been present, that our elections don't heed our voices either. Could not agree with you more.
We need the people who are running to represent us, to fight for our votes, to point out and educate those points. And the fact that we are in a proprietary software system, we can't even look in, like when people say, you can't prove to me that it's rigged, I'm like, you can't prove to me that it's not rigged because we can't simply look into the black box. We don't own it and we pay for it, but yet we don't own it.
Auditable elections are critical. I want to absolutely meet you there. There's no reason to have elections being conducted by proprietary information. There's no legitimate role for proprietary information in so crucial a public process. I mean, I would say that there's no role for proprietary information and algorithms in any public process. We think about bail and sentencing determinations often being informed by artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's all illegitimate too. If it's a public decision, it should be a transparent decision. And if it's a private algorithm or a piece of software, it's not transparent by definition. We who are seeking elections should be calling these issues out. I just want to, again, invite the press to be part of that process, because without it, I don't think that message is going to get heard. And again, I'm very thankful for you, using your platform to draw attention to these issues. I think more journalists need to do it.
All right, thank you.
Super Chat says the Democratic Party cannot be transformed from the inside. Your thoughts on that before we get out of here real quick?
Yeah, I mean, you could think of me as inside if you think of someone who was registered as a Green Party person for 15 years and, was arrested fighting Bush's wars and arrested challenging Obama's surveillance and, has fought in the courts and in the streets against, all of their abuses and Trump's corruption. You could think of me as inside the Democratic Party, but I am very much an outsider running to take the leader of the Democratic Party out of that position. So, I don't know exactly what reform from within the party means, but running an immigrant Muslim to take out the most powerful corporate politician on the planet, I don't think of that as an inside fight in any way. And, particularly to the people want to get new voices in there. I'm happy to be an outlet for that outrage.